there, this is Tami with Lyrical Lip Service, and you are watching week 5 of my vlog. I'm super excited to bring you Swiss Chocolate, the debut novel by James Weil. I squirmed in my seat, trying to get a glimpse of the Swiss Alps over my mother, whose great head of red hair all but obstructed my view. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, and her skin looked pale and drawn. "Stop leaning over me," she snapped. I sat back in my seat and scowled. Looking to my father for assistance was no use, since he never stopped reading his book, a lengthy discourse on world affairs by Oxford Analytica, until the plane came to a complete stop at the terminal. In fact, he didn't say much the entire trip, he and my mother avoiding conversation whenever possible since we left New Jersey. With less than an hour before our train left Geneva, we took a cab from the airport to the train station. At 15, not only was this my first trip to Europe, but it was also the first time I had heard French in everyday use. I had studied the language for years in school, and some of the words sounded familiar, but it all seemed so new. Besides, my academic career was horrible, and I never really studied my lessons well anyway. My father's French was passable, impressing me with his ability to converse with the taxi driver, even though his accent was awful. The train station bustled with people and activity, people darting all around without concern, intent on their own agenda. Seeing an opening in the traffic, I sighed, smiled, tucked my ski bag over my shoulder, and reached down to grab my bags from where the cab driver had dropped them to join in the fray. Yet, to my surprise and grief, I could barely lift my suitcases. My mother and grandmother, having both been more excited about my going to boarding school in Switzerland than I was, had taken me shopping in New York to outfit me with appropriate clothing. Brooks Brothers and Bloomingdale's had a very good weekend when my grandmother came to town, and now I was paying the price trying to lug all those clothes through the train station. "Hurry up," said my mother, glancing back at me with scorn as I hobbled along behind her beneath the staggering weight of my bags. At last we found a porter to help us, and we were taken to our train. There was something very old world and romantic about taking the train through Switzerland. I had taken trains from where we lived in Rumson, New Jersey to New York, but those were just small, uncomfortable commuter trains. This one was stately, and we had our own compartment that opened to a corridor along the side of the car. There were large plush seats with enough room for 6 people to be quite comfortable, so you can imagine how much room that allowed the 3 of us. Nevertheless, as before my father read his book, my mother looked tired and gaunt, and I stared out the large single-pane window and dreamed of the adventures these rails must have had in the past. My father had mentioned that the trip to the Sierra should last about 3.5 hours, winding through the canton of Valais in the southern part of Switzerland. From Sierra we were to take another train to Bluche, where my school was located. I had no clue where these places were. My mother had shown me the brochure for the school. The pictures of the dining room looked more like a country club than a boys' dormitory, and the rooms seemed so European and different. But, and this is a big but, the school was located right next to a famous ski resort and was included in the curriculum. I couldn't wait. I had thumbed through the brochure with disbelief, thinking that all my dreams had finally come true. My cousins went to the same school when they were about my age. My uncle died in a train wreck when I was just a baby, and my aunt packed up her kids and moved to Switzerland to help deal with her grief. She suggested I go to the school to help with my discipline problems, believing the Swiss Alps would be the perfect place to help stimulate my intellect. I had already been expelled from 2 private schools because of my miserable academic failures and rowdy behavior. Exasperated, my parents finally pulled me out of private schools altogether and sent me to public schools. That was a disaster. The other kids hunted me on the playground relentlessly. Not being much of a fighter, I did my best to protect myself. Yet I ended up on an almost weekly basis with my clothes scuffed, torn, and covered in blood. I was finally suspended for fighting, and my parents decided Switzerland was my only chance at ever having a respectable academic career. The train pulled out of the station shortly after noon. Before long, my mother dozed off, and my father, who sat across from me, put down his book and eyed me up and down. His pale blue eyes had a slightly hardened look. He had dark wavy hair and boyish full lips. He was a tall man, 6'2", and his amazing good looks made him stand out wherever he went. His tweed blazer and gray slacks were his idea of casual dress. screw this up and there won't be any more chances for you, he finally said. I won't screw it up, Dad. Your grades are worse than awful and your behavior has been an embarrassment to this family. And don't think for a minute that you are being sent to the finest boarding school in Switzerland as some kind of a reward for your antics. In my book, you are less than shit, he said, scowling at me. My chest muscles tightened as I flinched from his words. When he talked to me that way, I never knew if he might follow it up with a slap in the face. It wouldn't be the first time. The truth was, I didn't know if I was going to screw it up. Although a voracious reader, I always had a tough time with school. I read books way beyond my age level, but couldn't perform well in school to save my life. It baffled my teachers and parents, but their consternation didn't come close to my feelings of guilt for my underachievement. I took all the opportunities being raised in a well-to-do family handed me for granted, but going to school in Switzerland overwhelmed me with self-doubt and fear of failure. Instead of answering him and possibly aggravating him further, I just nodded slightly and then returned to staring out the window at the passing scenery. The leaves were beginning to turn, and I scanned the horizon for the snowy peaks I had imagined seeing, but there were only rolling hills covered with wheat and corn. I had expected to see a lot more mountains and wondered if the Swiss Alps were simply an imaginary product invented by Hollywood. As the train gently rocked and my mother began to snore softly, she rested her head on my father's shoulder, and he went back to his book. Fantastic book, Swiss Chocolate by James Weil, his debut novel. I will have links to James's blog and his website on theircalypservice.com, and you can check that out, and also samples of my writing and the writing of my friends. And I will be bringing you something special, I'm sure, for Casual Friday. I don't know what yet. It's going to be a surprise for me and for you. But until then,